it by having a resolution that makes it clear. Yeah.
My question has to do with, I've read documents that the banks, the Federal Reserve, and other private institutions are deliberately destroying the economy to form a new world order. I'd like to get your point on that.
Well, I didn't get the memo. If they were, I'm not part of it.
You didn't get the memo, but it's in, I've actually pulled articles out of the UCF database that they're destroying the economy on purpose.
No, I think whatever, in all seriousness, whatever...
And also, can I also get your opinion on what would be the next step in the New World Order after they destroy the economy? Because I know you said you worked for George Bush, right? And he coined the word New World Order in front of Congress.
So maybe it's job 2 for him. He's back.
It's not a joke,
sir.
The
way I would think about it is... I know there's a lot of suspicion of finance in the Fed. And by the way, this is an old story in America. For everybody who says, this current misunderstanding or mistrust of Wall Street, this is as old as our country. Our country's political economy has always been a tug of war among agrarian and commercial interests on the one hand and financial interests on the other. We're just playing a different chapter of that. For whatever criticisms one might have of the Fed, I will say that the Fed is composed of really remarkable, talented people. As a country, we're blessed to have had the leadership of the Fed that we've had. Whatever mistakes they may or may not have made, we're still very blessed. And having worked with a lot of Fed staff, both in Washington and the regional banks, over many years, I can say that those are really, really talented people too. I think that what the Fed has to do is to remember that it is the central bank of the United States. It's not the central bank for people who live in my city. And I'd like to see the Fed, more focused on broader economy and a little bit less panicking every time somebody from Wall Street comes rolling into town. But I think by and large, they're doing a very good job.
So you're saying that the Federal Reserve is a part of government. It's not a private institution?
The Federal Reserve, technically speaking, the Federal Reserve is a creation of the Congress. It's not a government agency, but it is government. It's not a private institution. There is a fiction, because of the way the Federal Reserve Act was set up, that member banks, quote, own stock in the Fed. But the Fed is essentially a government institution. Its accounts are consolidated with the government. So when the Fed earns money on its own account, that money is returned to the Treasury every year.
Why is there so much secrecy in the why would you allow it to be audited? If there's nothing to hide, usually criminals try to hide their books from the public.
It's audited every year.
Evil works under darkness. Evil works under darkness. Good happens in day.
We've heard, I saw you on CNBC talk about auditing the Fed, and you said against it, and I was just kind of wondering, the political climate we're in, how, expand upon a little bit on more your reasons on why you would see that as a problem, on why auditing the Fed or congressional mandate per se of auditing the Fed would be a problem.
Well, I guess I start out by saying if Ron Paul is for it, I can probably not be. No, that's the problem is that the Fed is audited. I mean, in the sense that most of us in this room would use the term auditing, the Fed is audited. The Fed's books are audited. From an accounting perspective, the Fed is audited. That's not what the Congress meant by auditing. It didn't mean looking at the accounts and making sure they were reasonable. It meant more of a policy audit, and I don't think that's what's intended in having an independent Fed. My gentle criticism of the Bernanke Fed has been trying to take too much territory, and the more territory you take that's political, the more you're in the Congress's crosshairs. So the more you say you want to be involved in regulation, or the more that you get involved outside monetary policy, you really are firmly in the Congress's line of fire. So in some sense, the Fed put itself in this position. In part to defend the Fed, it had little choice. We had 2 treasuries in a row where Treasury secretaries sat on their hands, and the Fed really used its capabilities to provide massive amounts of liquidity that probably shouldn't have been done on the Fed's balance sheet. So I think the Fed did what it had to do, but it certainly bears this new political risk. So I think auditing the Fed from a policy perspective is probably a mistake. I don't think most members of Congress are incredibly interested in optimal monetary policy. I think they're interested in easy money. But that's just one person's view. You've probably read a number of popular books around the crisis, but I don't think I exaggerate when I say that the shocks that hit the U.S. economy through the financial system, period 2007, 2009, definitely had the ability to convert into almost a Great Depression-like scenario. It is very hard for me to over-exaggerate this for you. It's an event I'm sure that has seared you. Now, when you think about liquidity crises, you normally think in banking about old-style bank runs, which we don't see very much of, at least in this country, in commercial banks. But that's exactly what happened in what we now know as the shadow banking system, the financial system that was built around banks. We had a very nasty bank run for the very same reasons that in history we had bank runs. If I tell you there's a problem out there, but you don't know where it lives, the right answer is to convert to cash. So when you go back to Federal Reserve commentary at the onset of the crisis, the official word was this isn't going to be a problem.